Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Christina Rossetti's poem Cousin Kate, part of the Edexcel Conflict series. We're going to just look at 5 moments from the poem, just to help you with your revision, focusing in on features of language structure and form. There is another video that accompanies this one that looks at form in a lot more detail and gives you some information about context to help you on your way. So get your flashcards ready and let's get started. Okay, let's start with the beginning of the poem, the first stanza. I've not popped all of it in, but just a few important bits. So you're going to notice straight away that we're in past tense. I was a cottage maiden. Now that's important because the word maiden connotes innocence and chastity. So the fact that it's in past tense is already kind of hinting to us that has changed for her because of this Lord. Now she's hardened by son and heir. Now this is obviously a metaphor here, but what it's telling us about when it says hardened, it doesn't necessarily mean emotionally. It might more mean physically, because she works out in the open air. And this is important because it's telling us immediately about her status and her class as a lower class woman, cottage maiden, and the fact that she works outside. So any kind of relationship with a lord is potentially going to be problematic. In the second half of this stanza, what's really interesting is the way that the agency shifts. What I really mean by that is who the subject of the sentence is, because at first she's the subject of the sentence. You know, I was a cottage maiden. You know, she's talking about herself in using first person pronouns, and then it shifts so that it's a great lord finding her. She becomes the object of the sentence, meaning that suddenly, like, she's lost some of that power. It's the lord that chose her to be his, and it's almost like she has very little that she can do about it. And she repeats these rhetorical questions. Why did a great lord find me out and praise my flaxen hair? Why did a great lord find me out to fill my heart with care? So there's a real sense of like his accountability, that she would have been fine had he left her well alone. She wasn't able to say no to him. But the end of this stanza with a metaphor, to fill my heart with care, does actually tell us that she had feelings for him, that she did love him, which makes the heartbreak that's going to happen later on in the poem even more powerful. Okay, again, I've taken the first line and a few little bits afterwards. So I'm really interested in this hyperbole, this very emotive verb. He lured me to his palace home, which makes him almost sound predatory in this moment, like she is the victim, that she's been tricked or trapped in some way. And the reference to a palace creates a juxtaposition with that opening line, I was a cottage maiden, showing the difference in their status, palace to cottage. And then we get some descriptions of what their romantic relationship was like through these similes. He wore me like a silken knot. He changed me like a glove. So it continues the idea that's mentioned earlier in the stanza about her just being a plaything to him, something that can be worn, taken on or off, changed again like a glove. So she's referencing the fact that his affections for her and his use of her is only temporary, but the impact of that temporary use is catastrophic as presented in this metaphor. So now I moan, an unclean thing. She's sort of dehumanizing herself, but the reference to herself being unclean or dirty is about the corruption of her innocence. She is no longer the maiden. And again, remember the time period we're in. We're in the 19th century. Women who had sexual relationships outside of wedlock would have been disowned by their families, would have been left. And this is what's happened to her. But what's more upsetting is that she might have been a dove being a symbol of innocence and purity, a very well-known symbol. And we've got this modal verb being used here, might. It's saying that she had this potential to remain good and pure, and he took that away from her. And you've got the juxtaposition again between the unclean thing and the dove. So the reality of her situation versus her potential of what she could have been had this great lord left her alone. Now, in the third stanza, there's a real shift because we go from this description of the relationship we had with the Lord to a direct address to her cousin, to "Oh, Lady Kate." We've got this interjection here, "Oh, oh, Lady Kate." So again, you've got this sort of sense of maybe heightened emotions. So Lady Kate, the fact that she's using her title here is an indication of what happens next in the story, that it is her cousin Kate that becomes his lady. You grew more fair than I. Now, the adjective fair in this case means beautiful. So we've got a comparative adjective here, more fair, more beautiful. So we're referencing here the fact that her cousin became more attractive, explaining the Lord's shift in focus. It could also be a sign of like how she grew in stature later on by marrying him. And we've got this metaphor, he lifted you from mean estate. Now the adjective mean here means like humble, sort of more lowly. So again, it's a reference to status and class. So he lifted you from mean estate to sit with him on high. Now this is obviously perhaps what she had assumed he would do with her, but the fact is because she was just a plaything, a glove, a silken knot, she could be discarded for when someone or something, you know, more beautiful comes along. And that is of course what's happened here. Now, because you were so good and pure, he bound you with his ring. So we've got another metaphor here. The idea about being bound by his ring is another kind of reference to that objectification of women, this idea about trapping, you know, if she's bound to him, she can't escape. But there's also a real bitter irony in these lines because it's her goodness and purity that has attracted the Lord to her, as well as her beauty, obviously. And that is, of course, how the narrator began. And the only reason she is no longer pure, I'm doing this because obviously I'm talking about 19th century standards, he is no longer interested in her. And so he's never going to marry her because she is impure, even though it's his actions that have led to it. Okay, so we continue here with some direct address to cousin Kate, and we've got the same repetition of this interjection. "Oh, cousin Kate, my love was true. Your love was written in sand." Okay, so the kind of message has changed again here now, because it's not just about the bitterness that he abandoned her. She also seems bitter because her cousin, in her opinion, does not love him truly in the way that she did. So this metaphor, "your love was written in sand," is again referencing the temporality of her love, i.e. if it's only written in sand, it can be cleared, it can be wiped away really easily. And it juxtaposes her love, which was true. So you get this sort of bitterness here about the cousin's intentions, and then that's developed with this really angry tone that starts to shine through in the second half of this stanza. So she's now giving a hypothetical, i.e. if things were the other way round, if it were you, okay, that had been in a relationship with him and I was the cousin that he then approached, he would never have won me with his love nor bought me with his land. So she's really judging the cousin now, not just for her lack of love and her kind of different intentions, but because she's betrayed her. She's betrayed the narrator. And she's saying, not only would I not have fallen in love with him, not only would I have not been bought by him, like you have, metaphorically, I would have spit into his face. Note all of the consonants there, like the T sounds, and even some of the sibilants in spit. Spit is quite onomatopoeic in itself. So you've got the sibilant sounds of the S and the face, yet at the same time you've got these harsh T's and that fricative F. It creates this really angry tone. I would have spit spit into his face. So the ultimate rejection, and not have taken his hand. Now, interestingly, the meter becomes a little bit irregular here. But if you think, I would have spit into his face, so that's still with our iambic tetrameter, and not have taken his hand. Suddenly here we have this little bit of irregularity, and I really think it's because this is the a really important moment for the poem about what the narrator would have done for her family. So it sort of becomes about family relationships here now, and sort of female solidarity even as well. Okay, and then the final stanza, I'm just looking at the last few lines. Now, my fair-haired son, at the beginning of the stanza, she says, yet I've a gift you have not got, which is a metaphor, and this is what the gift is. It's her boy. Okay, so we discover at the end of this poem that she's actually had a baby by the Lord, which makes her situation even worse. Like, he's abandoned her with a baby to marry her cousin. Oh. But anyway, sorry, go off on one. My fair-haired son, my shame, my pride. So look at the juxtaposition here. Her son is both pride, like she loves him, but he's also a symbol of her shame because he is the product of this relationship out of wedlock. Then we've got this really lovely plosive alliteration and repetition. Cling closer, closer yet. So again, you've got that idea of that bond, the repetition of closer, that comparative adjective there, like drawing attention to the love that she has for her son. And now we get the kind of the really bitter lines. Your sire would give broad lands for one to wear his coronet. So you've got this hyperbole of the broad lands, like this is what would be given. You would give out anything for this, to wear his coronet, i.e. to have a son. So there's this sort of jealous twist at the end of the poem where she's almost like, you're not able to reproduce an heir, which is of course at that time very, very important, particularly for sort of upper class families. And she's like, but I've already done it. So you get this sort of little bitterness at the end. So yeah, this poem ends up being about such a number of things. It's about class difference, it's about gender, it's about love, it's about family and family relationship. But within all of those areas, it's also to do with conflict. It's to do with the kind of injustices of these conflicts. I hope that's helped. Give me a shout if you've got any questions, or particularly about any of the bits of the poem that I didn't go through. I'm trying to keep it short just for revision's sake. If it is helpful, do subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll get notifications of when the rest of the conflict videos are ready, and it's great help for me as well. So thank you very much as well if you have done so already. Anyway, that's it. Happy revising. Thanks again.